The October night storm lashed the Willow Creek Valley. The wind howled like a wild beast, the rain lashed the wooden porch roof and poured down on the cold porch floor. In the gray rain, Elena Hartfield stood still, her body trembling and her dress clinging to her body, revealing her smooth bare shoulders and panting breath. Her hair was messy and wet, her eyes wide open like a cornered animal. In front of her was Thomas Grant, the man she had lived with for the past few months. He stood straight, his white shirt soaked with water, his muscles bulging under the flashing lightning. His deep blue eyes were fixed on Elena, no longer warm like the evenings sitting by the fire, but cold and suspicious. Behind him, under the yellow light from the wooden door, two figures appeared. A middle-aged woman with a faint smile, her eyes full of calculation. And beside her, a young woman in a blue silk dress, her golden hair curled elaborately, walked up the stairs like a queen. Her smile was sharp, both proud and cruel. Elena Hartfield, the middle-aged woman's voice rang out clearly over the sound of the rain. "You have deceived me long enough. This is Eloise, the real bride of Mr. Thomas Grant." Elena felt her heart stop. She wanted to scream, to explain, but her trembling lips could not utter a word. Her eyes met the gaze of Eloise, her half-sister, the one who should have replaced her in the carriage that day. Instead, Elena was pushed away like a useless commodity. And now, Eloise stood there, denying it all. "Is it true?" Thomas's voice rang out, low and heavy. He took a step towards Elena, the distance between them only a few inches. "Tell me, who are you?" Elena clenched her hands, her nails digging into her skin. She wanted to scream that she had no intention of lying, that it was all just her stepmother's cruel arrangement. But when his eyes looked straight at her, eyes that had once made her feel safe, now filled with suspicion, her throat tightened. A small hand tugged at her skirt. Elena bent down, meeting the wet face of Laya, Thomas's 6-year-old daughter. The child was trembling, hugging her legs tightly, her clear eyes sparkling with tears. "Mother," Laya whispered, her voice small but loud like thunder in the night sky. Elena knelt down, wrapping her arms around the little girl, tears mingling with the rain running down her cheeks. "My dear, you have never been a lie." She choked, her voice trembling but determined. Eloise laughed softly, a bitter laugh. "What right does an impostor have to take her in? Thomas, don't you see? She's just taking advantage of the weakness of men and children." Thomas clenched his fists, veins popping out on his strong arms. He turned to look at Elena, his eyes torn between trust and betrayal. Thunder rumbled in the sky, illuminating her face, a beautiful, wet face, trembling with fear and love. In that moment, Elena knew her life had been pushed to the brink. If she told the truth, she would lose everything. If she remained silent, she would become a liar in the eyes of the only man who had ever made her feel protected. "Thomas," she spoke softly, her voice lost in the sound of the rain. "Names can be wrong, but feelings are never lies." He looked at her, his eyes torn in two, and then, as Eloise took a step forward, placing her white hand on his arm, Elena felt her heart break. The rain pounded, the wind howled, the whole world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the answer. Would the truth be revealed, or would love collapse right here? A week before that stormy night, Elena Hartfield's life had been snapped like a dry branch. The Barrett family's gray brick house in Green Hollow had never been warm to her. Since her father's death, the house, which had been quiet and laughter-free, had now echoed with the cold commands of her stepmother, Miriam. To her, Elena was not a daughter, but a shadow that lived off the Barrett name. Even Eloise, her half-sister, 3 parts innocent and 7 parts pampered, had never reached out to help her sister. That morning, the autumn wind blew coldly through the window. Miriam sat upright in her armchair, her voice flat as if reading a verdict. "Tomorrow, I will leave." Elena looked up, her hand that was mending her old shirt paused. "Go? Where, mother?" "To Wyoming. A man named Thomas Grant has sent a letter. He wants a wife." Elena was stunned. But wasn't he writing to Eloise? Miriam narrowed her eyes, her lips curling into a cold smile. "Eloise is only 17. Do you think I'd let her throw herself into a widow with a child? No, that's more your thing. You're 22, strong enough to handle it. And honestly, she leaned forward, her eyes cutting Elena. They wouldn't be sorry if you disappeared. The words were like a slap in the face. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to say that she too had dreams, that she too longed to be loved, but her throat was choked. In this house, she had never had a voice. That night, she secretly opened the letter that had been folded many times by her stepmother. The handwriting was firm and neat. My name is Thomas Grant, 35 years old, widower with a little daughter. I don't promise much. All I have is a solid roof, hard work, and kindness. If anyone is willing, I will accept it with all my sincerity. Elena trembled as she traced the handwriting. After years of being looked down upon, this was the first time she had read such unadorned but sincere words. Kindness. The word resonated in her heart like a small fire in the middle of a winter night. But Miriam didn't give her a choice. If you stay, I will scrub floors, wash clothes, and bow at Eloise's feet for the rest of my life. But if you go, at least you will have a chance to call a roof your own. Elena sat by the window all night, watching the moon crumble behind the clouds. When dawn broke, she folded the old clothes into a cloth bag and quietly kissed Eloise on the forehead. Even though she only turned her face away and pretended to sleep. Then she climbed into the swaying carriage and headed west, carrying with her a heavy burden of anxiety and a glimmer of hope. The journey seemed endless. During the day, the dust stung her face. At night, she huddled in a cheap inn, her hand clutching the letter in her pocket, clinging to the only thread that still connected her to an unknown future. Sometimes, over the pounding of the horse's hooves, she whispered, "Please, God, let him be a good man. Please let the child not hate me." And then, as the carriage turned into Willow Creek Valley, the sight that appeared made her heart pound. Not the ramshackle shack she had imagined, but a spacious log house, sturdy fences, and the smell of herbs wafting from the kitchen smoke. A tall man emerged from the stable, his sleeves rolled up, his shoulders strong. His dark hair was streaked with straw, his face tanned but glowing in the afternoon light. Thomas Grant. He paused, his blue eyes searching, and slowly removed his hat. "You must be Eloise Barrett?" Elena paused, her heart constricting. For a moment she wanted to shout, "No, I am Elena. I am just a replacement." But his eyes were too stern, too direct. Miriam had said, "Just take the name. He won't mind." Elena swallowed, nodding weakly. "Yes, I am." A smile flickered at the corner of his lips, strangely warm. "You're earlier than expected. That's a good sign." From the porch, a small girl poked her head out, her brown hair tied in pigtails, her eyes wide with fear and curiosity. Thomas bent down slightly. "This is my daughter, Laya. She is shy, but her heart is bigger than the sky." Elena felt her chest tighten. She knew her true journey had only just begun, the journey of someone who lived in a borrowed name, but whose heart could not be deceived. The first days in Willow Creek were like a new coat, both warm and restrictive for Elena. The sturdy wooden roof, the ever-burning fire, the hills covered with wildflowers, all like a peaceful dream she had never dared to imagine. But every moment, anxiety still clung to her like a shadow. She was living under a name that did not belong to her. Thomas Grant was a man of few words but serious. He never forced, but his deep blue eyes had a way of penetrating the depths of the person opposite. When Elena helped him stack firewood, every time she raised her head and met his gaze, she had to quickly turn away, afraid that if she was distracted for a second, the secret would be revealed. Laya, the 6-year-old girl, was also not easy to get close to. She often hid behind the door, her big round eyes quietly observing. When Elena reached out her hand, Laya hesitated for a long time before stepping forward. The first night, when Thomas coaxed the child to sleep, the child turned to look at Elena, a look both curious and wary, as if to ask, "Who are you really?" One morning, Elena tried to make bread according to her father's old recipe. The aroma filled the kitchen. She hoped this small thing would help erase the distance. But when it was served, Laya only took a bite, then softly said, "My mother used to make bread, but it tasted different." That innocent sentence made Elena's heart ache, like a reminder that she could never replace anyone. Thomas remained kind. He taught her how to tend the garden, showed her how to harvest pumpkins, weed the paths. But there were moments when his silence made her suffocate. One time, when they were leading the horse out to the field, Thomas suddenly asked, "How is your family in Green Hollow?" Elena was stunned, her throat dry. She pursed her lips, just quickly replied, "I don't want to remember anymore." He nodded, not asking further. But that look, a look filled with both doubt and understanding, made her even more uneasy. At night, when the wind whistled through the cracks in the door, Elena often tossed and turned, unable to sleep. She wondered, if one day Thomas knew the truth, would he consider her a traitor? Would this warm house collapse, leaving her to return to her life as a spare human in the cold Barrett house? The doubt came not only from the outside, but also from her own heart. Elena realized that she had begun to long for Thomas's heavy footsteps on the porch, longing to hear his brief warning, "Don't get cold." When he accidentally touched her hand lightly while handing her the cup, her whole body felt hot, a feeling both sweet and scary. "I must not be moved," she told herself, because it was all a lie. But sometimes Thomas also made her confused. One afternoon it was drizzling, his shirt was soaked. Elena awkwardly ran out to hand him a towel. He silently accepted it, but instead of wiping it away, he placed his warm hand on her shoulder, his eyes staring into her heart. In that moment, Elena saw clearly, not only she, but he was also struggling with unanswered questions. The small challenges in daily life only added to the relationship's doubts. One time, the unruly horse threw the basket. Elena fell face down in the mud. Thomas rushed to support her, his strong arm around her waist, his masculine breath close. At that moment, she clearly saw the trembling in his eyes. But immediately after, Thomas let go, only saying softly, "Be more careful." She stood up, her whole body trembling, both ashamed and longing. Elena knew, if there was no truth separating her, perhaps she would have let her heart drift away with that gaze. But it was the name Eloise that she was carrying that made everything become an abyss. In that wooden house, feelings quietly blossomed, but at the same time, thick layers of doubt surrounded them. Elena understood. Love can sprout, but if the roots are based on a lie, the first storm will sweep everything away. And she, whether she wanted it or not, was still waiting for that storm to come. Winter in Willow Creek came faster than Elena expected. The cold winds from the mountains blew through, frosting the glass windows. In the cabin, the fire became the only heart to warm it. It was in that silence, amidst the crackling of the firewood, that the invisible bond between Elena and Thomas began to tighten. One evening, when Thomas returned from the stables, his hand was bleeding from a sharp piece of wood. Elena ran over in panic, holding his large hand. "Let me see." She pulled him down to sit on the chair, her small hands trembling but carefully cleaning the wound. The firelight illuminated his face. The strong lines became strangely soft. Thomas looked at her, his eyes softening, completely different from his usual stern look. The distance between the two of them was so close that Elena could feel his warm breath on her cheek. When she looked up, the hem of her off-the-shoulder dress accidentally slipped down, revealing the smooth white skin next to her collarbone. Thomas paused, his blue eyes lingering on that fragile gap, then quickly turned away. His voice was hoarse. "You don't need to be afraid of me." The short sentence made Elena's heart tremble violently. She squeezed his hand gently, whispering, "I've never been afraid." Another night, Elena sat by the stove, reading a fairy tale to Laya. The little girl rested her head on her lap, slowly falling asleep. When Thomas walked in, he stood still, watching the scene. A gentle young woman, her arms protectively around her little daughter. A small smile flashed across his lips, as rare as the sun in winter. Elena looked up, meeting his gaze, her cheeks flushed, her heart pounding as if she had just been caught in a taboo. The first snowfall, Thomas took Elena out to the backyard to teach her how to chop wood. She was clumsy. The axe blade slipped off the log, causing her to stagger. In an instant, Thomas had his arms around her waist, holding her tight. His tall figure pressed against her back, his strong breath blowing against the back of her neck, making her shiver. Elena turned her face away, but she couldn't hide her racing heart. "Just let me," Thomas said softly, his voice deep and warm. His hand rested on hers, both grasping the axe handle, their hands intertwined, hot in the cold air. When the axe blade fell, the wood split in two, but it was Elena's heart that truly split open, letting a strange feeling flow in. That night, when she returned to the house, her shoulders still smelling of fresh wood, Thomas handed her a ceramic cup filled with hot tea. His fingers accidentally touched hers. The touch was so light that it should have been nothing, but it was enough to make her blood rush to her face. They both fell silent for a moment, their eyes meeting in silence. Elena quickly turned away, but a faint smile still lingered on her lips. The silence between them was not distance, but like a thin thread that could break with just a slight movement, turning into a blazing fire. Thomas kept his distance, not going beyond the limit. But it was that restraint that made Elena fall deeper. Another time, in the warm kitchen, Elena was bending down to pick up firewood, her hair falling loosely over her shoulders, revealing the soft curve of her neck. Thomas accidentally walked in, stopped. He swallowed, then said softly, "It's cold, don't expose your shoulders." He left immediately, but Elena's heart pounded, knowing that he had seen more than what his words could express. In those quiet days, love did not blossom with promises or hasty kisses, but with every simple moment, a touch of the hand, a lingering look, a silence heavy with unsaid things. Elena understood that she was gradually belonging to this place, to that man. But at the same time, she also knows everything is still built on a borrowed name. And when the truth breaks out, will this young love still have enough strength to stand? Spring had just begun in Willow Creek. Wildflowers were blooming yellow along the hillsides, and snow melted into a babbling brook. Elena thought she could finally breathe life into her new home without the burden of a borrowed name. Warm dinners, Laya's clear laughter, Thomas's gentle gaze, all of it confirmed that this was home. But then, on a rainy, gray afternoon, the gates of hell opened. A frantic knock on the door startled Elena. Thomas stepped forward to open it, and in that moment, Elena felt her blood freeze. On the porch stood Miriam, her aged face set in a cold smile, and beside her, Eloise. Eloise was in a blue silk dress, her golden curls shining against the gray sky. She entered as if the house belonged to her. Her voice was sweet but venomous. "Mr. Grant, I am Eloise Barrett, the real one who wrote the love letter. I fear you have been deceived." Elena stood frozen, her hands clutching her skirts so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Miriam added, her voice emphatic, "She is Elena, Mr. Barrett's illegitimate daughter, who is always jealous and coveting what is not hers. She has taken on the identity of Eloise and fled here." Thomas turned his head, his stern gaze fixed on Elena. Her heart sank. For months she had lived in fear of this moment, and now it stood before her, naked as a shining blade. "Is that true?" Thomas's voice was low, each word weighing heavily on the air. Elena took a step toward him, her lips trembling. I didn't want to lie. I was forced. But since I came here, everything I've done has been true." Eloise laughed, a shrill laugh. "Really? What's so real about fake feelings? You've always wanted to take everything from me, my clothes, my father's attention, and now the life that should have been mine." Thomas frowned, his eyes torn. He looked at Elena, as if searching for some shred of evidence of his integrity. But her guilty silence was a confession. Miriam pressed in. "You see, she's a liar. Someone like that isn't fit to raise your daughter." In that moment, Laya ran out, her eyes panicked. She grabbed Elena's hand, her voice choked. "No, Mommy's not a liar. She sang me lullabies, held my hand when I was scared. I want Mommy to stay." Elena hugged the baby tightly, tears streaming down her face. But Thomas's eyes remained dark. He whispered, almost to himself, "I trusted, but in the end." The words were like a fatal stab. Elena felt her whole body tremble. She wanted to scream, to explain, but Eloise interrupted, pressing her white hand on Thomas's arm. "I can make up for it. Let me take care of her. Let me be the wife you truly chose." Elena looked at that scene and her heart broke. She understood. Staying another minute would only make things worse. In the heavy silence, she bent down and whispered in Laya's ear, "My dear, remember, you have never been a lie. You are all the truth in my heart." Then she stood up, holding her head high. Without looking at Thomas again, she quickly gathered a few meager things, put on her soaked cloak, and walked out the door. The rain outside poured down as if to erase all her footprints. Her skirt clung to her skin. The cold wind cut into every fiber of her flesh. But Elena didn't turn around. She knew that if she did, she would collapse in the arms of the man who had become her world. The door behind her closed, blocking out the warmth, blocking out Laya's sobs. Before Elena was only the dim road in the rain. And her heart, though broken, still pounded, carrying a terrible fear. Perhaps she had lost everything, forever. That rainy night, Elena trudged down the muddy path leading out of Willow Creek. Her dress was soaked, heavy as a stone. Each step felt like a stab to her heart. But what hurt more than anything was not the cold wind or the howling rain, but Thomas's suspicious gaze. The gaze that had once been the only place she had faith. In the house behind her, the air was unusually cold. Laya curled up in the stable, hugging the old rag doll Elena had sewn. She sobbed, her tears soaking into the dry straw. When Thomas found her, he sat down next to her, a trembling hand on her shoulder. "Laya, you have to eat something. Don't worry me." She turned away, her voice broken. "She's the mother, not the woman in the pretty dress." Thomas was startled. You know Elena isn't Eloise, right?" Laya nodded vigorously, her eyes filled with determination. "I knew it all along, but I didn't care. She was there for me when I had bad dreams, singing me songs about the stars. That's what a mother is. The other one doesn't know anything." The innocent but decisive words of his daughter broke down the last barrier in Thomas. He was silent for a long time, then stood up, his heart tightening. The image of Elena echoed in his head, her figure trembling in the rain, but her eyes still proud as she turned and left. Without hesitation, Thomas walked into her room, the cold, empty room. On the small table next to the bed, he found an old leather-bound notebook. Hesitating for a moment, he opened it. The slanted lines appeared. "I don't want to lie. I just want to survive." Laya smiled at me today. My heart was blooming. Thomas handed me a cup of tea. I was trembling, but happy. "I know the truth will come. When it does, I just hope you understand that this love is real." On the last page, the writing was blurred by tears. "If you send me away, I will still carry them in my heart, because that was the first time I knew what family was." Thomas clutched the notebook, took a deep breath. The wind howled outside, but in his heart, a decision had formed. He could not let that woman go like a liar. He rushed into the rain, saddled his horse, and whipped it. The sound of hooves echoed through the valley. "Elena!" he shouted, his voice lost in the wind. Finally, on the bumpy road beside the pine forest, he saw a small, unsteady figure. His cloak clung to him. His hair was wet with rain, but his steps were still steadfast. "Stop!" Thomas jumped off his horse and ran towards her. Elena turned around, her eyes bewildered. Before she could react, he was standing in front of her, breathing heavily, his hands shaking not from the cold, but from the fear of losing her forever. "Elena," he said, using her name for the first time. "I don't care about the name. I just know that you mended the old doll, planted pumpkin seeds in the backyard, sang lullabies to my daughter. You warmed this house. You are the only truth I need." Rain mixed with tears and streamed down Elena's cheeks. "But you were silent. You let me believe something wrong." Thomas reached out to touch her face, his fingers rough and gentle. "You can be silent in words, but you have never been silent in love. I read it all in everything you did. I was a fool to let you go." Elena looked at him, her heart torn between joy and fear. But then, as he pulled her into his warm embrace, the world seemed to melt away. In the rumble of thunder, they held each other tightly, like two survivors of a storm finally finding each other. At that moment, Elena understood. Even though the lie started with a fake name, this love was never fake, and it would decide their fate. The next morning, Willow Creek was bright after a fierce night storm. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the clouds, sprinkling the valley with soft golden rays, making the dewdrops still clinging to the leaves sparkle. Elena stood on the wooden porch, her face still marked by fatigue, but her eyes had a strange peace. She was no longer trembling with fear, but felt her heart warm, as if she had finally found a place to anchor. Behind, Thomas stepped out, his large hand gently grasping hers. The grip was firm, strong, like a promise without words. Elena looked up, meeting his deep blue eyes, still the man who had once made her tremble with doubt, but now was the shoulder she could trust for life. The sound of small footsteps echoed. Laya rushed onto the porch, her brown hair disheveled, her eyes bright. She hugged Elena, laughing as tears rolled down her cheeks. "I prayed, and God brought Mom back." Elena choked up, picked her up, and kissed her sun-scented hair. She felt the small body tremble in her arms, just as her heart had last night. "I won't leave again, my love," she whispered, her voice trembling but sure. That afternoon, as the sun set over the valley, the three of them stood under the white blossoming cottonwood trees. There was no fancy wedding dress, no organ or solemn church, just a gentle breeze, birdsong, and the witness of nature. Laya picked wildflowers, made a wreath, and placed it on Elena's head, then handed her mother a tiny bunch of clover. "You are the most beautiful bride," she said, her eyes sparkling. Thomas took Elena's hand, his voice low and resolute. "I choose you today and forever, not because of your name, not because of your circumstances, but because of you, the one who brought this house back to life." Elena tearfully replied, "And I choose you. Choose this home. Choose our children. This is the family I thought I would never have." The wind blew gently, carrying cotton flower petals as if witnessing their promise. In that moment, Elena knew that the past full of lies had ended. What remained was a new beginning, where she was no longer a replacement, but a beloved wife, a mother called by the sweetest name in the world. Willow Creek echoed with laughter again, and in Elena's heart, for the first time in many years, she truly felt like she had come home. The story of Elena Hartfield is not just a love story in the Wild West. It is the journey of a woman from darkness to light, from a rejected status to a respected wife and mother. Elena came to Thomas with a fake name, but left her mark with sincerity. She did not bring gold, status, or power. What she brought was only a heart that knew how to love. It was that truth that made the difference. A child called her mother, not because of a promise, but because of the warm embrace every night. A man chose her not because of circumstances, but because of the light she brought to his cold home. The message is clear. True love does not need a perfect status, but a heart that dares to give without calculation. People can enter each other's lives with mistakes, but if they stay with sincerity, that love will become the most right thing. The bigger lesson: no one is irreplaceable when they live with all their kindness and true feelings. Life may force us to play unwanted roles, but in the end, it is how we love and choose that rewrites the script. Elena has proven, even if it starts with deception, true happiness can still sprout from true love, and that is what every heart desires.